afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from the world. We appreciate your time and taking this opportunity to listen in on the Catholic Curriculum Standards webinar. So just once again, we're going to do a webinar, we're going to do an audio check. Make sure that everyone can hear us since we have many people online with us. My name is Jeannie Oliver, and I am an associate with Rubicon International, and I'm also joined by my colleague Anna.
Hello, everyone.
And we just want to make sure that you can hear us, so if you're hearing our voice, please go to the chat box in your WebEx toolkit or toolbox, open it up, and let us know where you're joining us from. I would say what's the weather like, but I think it's like stormy in the East Coast.
It's hot here in Portland, so we are ramping up for a hot, hot weekend.
That's right. It's supposed to be like 99, right?
I know. This is unheard of.
Well, usually you get in August.
Yes.
So usually that first week of August, it's like a heat wave here in Portland. So we got somebody joining us from Florida. The weather is magnificent. Thank you for letting us know that. In Delaware, it's hot. In Chicago, it's stormy. I heard the Midwest was getting some storms. Ooh, South Dakota, beautiful, 70 degrees. I know where I'm going.
Yeah, that sounds perfect temperature.
That sounds fantastic. We got someone joining from Tampa, Florida, and South Carolina, where it's overcast. Charleston, what a great little city. Love Charleston. And then Pennsylvania. This is great. I think we're almost getting somebody from every state. This is fantastic.
That's right.
So we have a couple joining us internationally as well, so we just appreciate you. So how this usually works is we are here at our Portland headquarters in Portland, Oregon, and we will be controlling the webinar on our end where you can hear us, but we won't be able to hear you audibly. I'll say that correctly. So we encourage you throughout the whole webinar, if you have any questions, comments, if you'd like us to slow down, please let us know in that chat box. That is basically your way of voicing your thoughts to us. We appreciate it. Now, afterwards, we are recording this session, so you will receive that recording shortly after today's webinar. Most likely it'll land into your inbox tomorrow. In addition to the recording, we will be writing up a blog that will be available on our website, and we will actually send all that in the chat box. So throughout the time we're hearing about the amazing curriculum standards and a process of how to implement them, we will be posting links, resource links, into the chat box. So please, once again, let us know in the chat window if you are receiving those resources or if you need assistance. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our amazing speakers for today. We are just absolutely beyond thrilled that Denise Donohue, the Deputy Director of Cardinal Newman Society, is joining us from Florida. She has a long list of amazing things she's done. She's been a professor, or she's still a professor, I think, a founder, an educator, an administrator, a department chair head. So she has pretty much taken on many roles and responsibilities over the years. So thank you so much, Dr. Donohue, for allowing us to have this time with you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my privilege. Can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome.
She's joining us from the great state of Florida.
We're over 99 today, I'm sure.
So that's where we're getting the heat wave, from Florida.
Yeah, and with humidity in Florida, too.
Yeah. Well, this wouldn't be possible without the partnership and Therese Edwards, the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for the Diocese of Lansing Schools. We are honored to have this partnership with the Diocese of Lansing Schools. It's been 4 years as we've started to build align their curriculum to not only the expectations they've set for their own schools, but in addition, they have been working closely with Dr. Donohue in aligning to the Catholic curriculum standards. So she's joining us to share out their best practice so that way perhaps you joining us online could take it and move it forward in your own school. So I'm going to hand it over.
Jamie.
Yeah.
We appreciate being here and certainly our partnership with Atlas as well.
Thanks.
I believe that Denise is going to start.
Sure. Are we ready to go?
We are.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Denise Donohue. I am the Deputy Director of K-12 Programs at Cardinal Newman Society, as well as the Catholic Education Honor Roll. Today we have 3 specific objectives that we're hoping to convey. The first 2, what are the foundational principles underpinning the design of the Catholic curricular standards and what types of standards are included? I'll be discussing those, and then Therese will come on at the end and she'll talk about how to implement those standards into your current lesson and unit planning. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish with the amount of time that we have today. Of course, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat box. I'll be happy to answer those for you. So first of all, a little bit of history of the Catholic curricular standards. How did they come about and why did they come about at the time that they did? We're all very familiar with the Common Core state standards and the discussion within our Catholic community as to how to best implement those standards, whether to adapt or adopt or not use them at all. Well, here at Cardinal Newman, we had received quite a few inquiries as to what a specific set of Catholic standards might look like. And isn't there a set of Catholic standards out there in these disciplines that we can just simply pick up and use and go with them? Well, we know a lot of our dioceses have done tremendous work in this area, and there are some beautiful sets of standards out there. And I'll be able to comment a little bit on those as we go through the seminar. But the first thing is that in 2014, the bishops themselves entered into this conversation, and the U.S. bishops themselves, and they released a document in 2014 to guide our Catholic schools in the approach of using standards. And it stated, and I'm going to quote here because this is the impetus for everything that we've done at the Cardinal Newman Society. They stated, Catholic schools must consider standards that support the mission and purpose of the school as a Catholic institution. Attempts to compartmentalize the religious and the secular in Catholic schools reflect a relativistic perspective by suggesting that faith is merely a private matter and does not have a significant bearing on how reality as a whole should be understood. Such attempts are at odds with the integral formation to education that is a hallmark of Catholic schools. Standards that support an appropriate integration should be encouraged. So we at Cardinal Newman really took this to heart, and with a host of additional Catholic scholars, we held a series of focus group meetings, specifically with our 9 different Catholic colleges and universities recommended from our Cardinal Newman program. And we also included Father Spitzer from the Magus Center, past president of Gonzaga, and representatives from the Catholic Textbook Project, and Dr. Sandra Stotsky from the University of Arkansas joined us, and she helped review the structure of the standards as well as her insistence upon the fact that we include a set of literature readings within the standards. So we really wanted to get the conversation going among the Catholic community itself about what specifically Catholic standards might look like in this area. So we spent perhaps 9 months to over a year actually looking at church documents to glean from those documents what these standards might look like in English, history, math, and scientific topics. Now, recently we've received some requests for standards in music and art, but at this time we don't really intend to create those additional standards, and I would encourage any of you who feel you have the expertise in that area to please go ahead and begin to undertake such a project. So we really wanted to get the standards going, this conversation going, but we realized that we really needed a framework, some type of grounding for the development of the standards. Well, at this particular time when the discussion of Common Core was very prominent, we at the Cardinal Newman Society were analyzing the church documents. We were working on a much larger project, and we were searching for principles of Catholic identity and education. And from that larger project, we gleaned 5 principles of Catholic identity, very similar to Archbishop Miller's 5 benchmarks of Catholic education, as well as the national standards and educational benchmarks from Loyola University. The 5 that we identified were inspired by divine mission, models Christian communion and identity, encounters Christ in prayer, scripture, and sacraments, integrally forms the human person, and imparts a Christian understanding of the world. So we used this research and we pulled 3 of those principles, inspired by divine mission, integrally forms the human person, and imparts a Christian understanding of the world, to use as our curricular framework. So from these 3, we identified 5 key components to guide our curricular design. And just as an aside here, our Principles Project is complete. We have on our website the Principles of Catholic Identity and Education. We also have questions for reflection and assessment. Something that administrators would love is our Faculty and Staff in-Service document. We're coming out with a board reflection in about 2 or 3 weeks, and by the end of the summer, we should have a parent guide as well. Basically set on a group of questions that these different particular stakeholders can ask of their Catholic school. So to look at the first key component, there's 5 key components again. The first key component of curricular design in the Catholic school should focus on the whole person, body, mind, and spirit, in light of his or her ultimate end and the good of society. So we see this early on. This is a continuing theme within the church documents, and especially in Gravissimum Educationis, or On Christian Education, which was promulgated in 1965 after Vatican II. But even in the Code of Canon Law in 1983, we read that since true education must strive for complete formation of the human person that looks to his or her final end, as well as to the common good of societies, children and youth are to be nurtured in such a way that they're able to develop their physical, moral, and intellectual talents harmoniously, acquire a more perfect sense of responsibility and a right use of freedom, and are formed to participate actively in social life. So as I'm reading these, some of these beautiful quotes from documents from the school, I just want to let you know that also on our website, we have an annotated bibliography, which is basically a summary of all of our documents on Catholic education, geared specifically for educators in Catholic schools. So you can go through that bibliography and look and find perhaps a document. Really sit down, because I believe you'll get lost in them. They're so beautifully written. They're very contemplative and reflective, and then absolutely practical and useful as well. So take some time this summer before school starts, choose one of those documents and spend some time with it. Really go into it and dig into it a little bit. So the second key component of curricular design promotes human virtues and the dignity of the human person, is created in the image and likeness of God and modeled on the person of Jesus Christ. So 2 examples here. 1, the religious dimension of education in a Catholic school. This was written in 1988. We read that the religious dimension makes a true understanding of the human person possible. A human being has a dignity and a greatness exceeding that of all other creatures. And in the Catholic school, we read how the Catholic school loses its purpose without constant reference to the gospel and frequent encounters with Christ. that it derives all the energy necessary for its educational work from him, and thus, quote, creates in the school community an atmosphere permeated with the gospel spirit of freedom and love. So in this setting, the pupil experiences his dignity as a person before he even understands the definition. Faithful, therefore, to the claims of man and of God, the Catholic school makes its own contribution towards man's liberation, making him, in other words, what his destiny implies, one who talks consciously with God, one who is there for God to love. That's beautiful, and I'm sure you all would agree with me that that would be something that you would like to read more of. So the third key component of curricular development is seeking to know and understand objective reality, which includes transcendent truth and is knowable by our senses, reason, and revelation. So as Catholics, we believe there's an objective reality that exists outside of our own construct and that we can enter into that reality as intellectual and spiritual beings. The educational product of a Catholic school is to bring human wisdom into an encounter with divine wisdom. And so it's important that we not use methodologies that might thwart that pursuit of truth and sequester us within restrictive boundaries. And here I'm thinking of it, maybe you are as well, the prescriptive instruction of close reading, where we're sequestered into only the text and not allowed, or not in that methodology itself. We're not supposed to bring in background knowledge or information, and we're supposed to only look at the text for what the text itself specifies and implies. In a Catholic world, in a Catholic education, everything is open to analysis and introspection. We're looking for the interrelatedness of things, and that's who and what we do. Our disciplines interrelate within each other. So this might lead us to a little discussion on science and theology, or faith and reason, with Pope John Paul. So he wrote a beautiful letter to the director of the Vatican Observatory, and if it's not something that you haven't read, and it might not be on your radar screen, it's not a church document on education, but boy, does it ground us in faith and reason. It was written in 1988, and he speaks beautifully about the unification of science and religion. And within it, it states that each discipline should preserve its autonomy and become fuller in its own sense. And he says, in order to possess its own principles, its pattern of procedure, its diversities of interpretation, and its conclusions, neither ought to assume that it forms a necessary premise for the other. And he also stated that the unprecedented opportunity we have today is for a common interactive relationship in which each discipline retains its integrity and yet is radically open to the discovery of insights from the other. So here we have, from what Pope John Paul wrote in Fides et Ratio, faith and reason are like two wings on a dove that come together and transform and transcend us to perfect truth. This was a very difficult area for us to create our Catholic standards in, because first we had to understand, do we integrate our theology into every science lesson and into every science unit? And if we do, how do we do that, and how do we best do that? And so many discussions with our Catholic scientists from our Cardinal Newman colleges and universities, as well as Dr. Christopher Baglow from the Notre Dame Seminary. I want to give you a title of a book, and I want you to, I gave it to Jeannie for them to put on the chat box. The title of Christopher Baglow's book is Faith, Science, and Reason, Theology on the Cutting Edge. There is no other book like this, and it really looks at science through the eyes of theology. And talking to this content expert professional, he is an advocate of what John Paul said, of keeping both the disciplines of theology and its inquiry, as well as science and its inquiry, its methods of looking at things whole and organic and mature, but at a separate time, these two disciplines will merge in a beautiful, flourishing discussion, and that those discussions perhaps will happen organically in a lesson on science, in which case the teacher should go down that path and say, yes, you know, do you see this? It's beautiful. But perhaps to have a separate lesson or a separate course or a separate time where these types of discussions are had. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's really the pursuit of objective reality. Reality exists outside of us. We can enter into that reality and know it as rational, intellectual, and spiritual beings. So back to the fourth key component of curricular development. And that component should present a Catholic worldview and enable the student to go deeper into the heart of the Catholic Church. That's what we're called to do as Catholic educators, to evangelize, to work with the Church, to sanctify our students and families, as well as to educate. So from the document of the Catholic School, indulge me, I'm going to read, it's the task of the whole educative community to ensure that a distinctive Christian educational environment is maintained in practice. And an equally important role belongs to the teachers in safeguarding and developing the distinctive mission of the Catholic school, particularly with regard to the Christian atmosphere, which should characterize its life and teaching. So not only should teachers model Christian witness, but curricular materials should be chosen that present authentic church teaching in order to pass on our Christian heritage and traditions, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, did you want to break for a question? I've got one more key component, but if there's something out there, I can take that right now as well.
No, I think everyone's just listening very intently to what you're sharing. And I did get the link out on the chat box. I'm not sure if it's the same one you're speaking of, but I'm hoping it is. But anyways, I just think that the information that you're providing is right on mark, and it connects. And Teresa, you can jump in here anytime. It connects with truly what we integrate into our instruction for curriculum.
Yeah, I'm going to finish my lecture here in a person after this slide. I know this first part here is just really setting the stage, looking at the history, looking at the framework, looking at really what underpins the Catholic standards themselves. And it's pretty deep, and there's a lot of information there. And I don't expect, you know, everyone to get everything all at once. It's something that really I'm anticipating teachers will have to look at our resources, then go deeper into the church documents as well as some of the other writings of Catholic and liberal arts writers, as well as our classical writers. But the fifth key component, again, is to encourage a synthesis of faith, life, and culture. This is what we're all about. We're educating our students to live in the world today so that they can be saints in heaven tomorrow. So, you know, it's not just to learn the knowledge, to learn skills, to form ourselves, but for our students to go out and to be leaven for the world. And that's everything that we do in Catholic education. So it's important to encourage that synthesis of faith, life, and culture through the subjects that we teach, and those subjects should be taught in the light of the gospel, so that our students can grow in virtue and become exemplary Christians and models. So we want to make the world a little more humane and a loving place. So that's the end, really, of that segment on the foundation, the underpinning of the Catholic curricular standards themselves. So looking and reading all of this wonderful narrative and guidance that we've received from the Church, it was kind of challenging for me to put this into standard language, the language that we're all using in schools. today across the country. So, you know, I didn't want to lose a lot of the richness within the documents and the writing, so it was a little bit challenging, but I'm hoping that it's just enough so that teachers are intrigued by wanting to know a little bit more about the depth, but still have enough guidance to operationalize the standards within the classroom.
Right, makes sense. We did get a question, a clarifying question. The author of the book, The Faith, Science, and Reason for Theology, can you restate his name?
Oh, sure, most definitely. It's Christopher Baglow, B-A-G-L-O-W. And he really, he will tell you that he's not a scientist, but I have to disagree with him. It's beautiful. He's a theologian.
Oh, that's great. Well, I am putting a link to his book in the chat box. So for those looking for it, in just a moment, you'll receive that.
So again, the standards are complementary to a set of standards that a school is already using. They're not complete in and of themselves. In my opinion, they're a foundational set of standards that all Catholic schools should look at or use. You don't have to use all of them. You can use some of them. You can pick and choose. There's no requirement whatsoever on that. It's just, hey, let's look at what's out there and see if perhaps we can't include some of these to further our Catholic identity and to further our mission as a Catholic school.
So it's more of a partnership with their content area standards.
Sure, exactly. Exactly. Yep. And actually,
or parallel, I guess, would be another way to say that.
Yeah, or parallel. I just looked at a beautiful set, and I'm going to call out the Diocese of Venice here. I've been working with them as well, and they just shared with me their K-6 set of standards for mathematics and English language arts and how they've integrated the Catholic curricular standards in there, very much like what the Diocese of Lansing is doing as well. So what kind of standards and what types are they? Well, basically they're content standards, performance standards, and effective standards. Content standards, there's not as many content standards because the U.S. CCB, the bishops, do have theology content standards, and of course the schools have already chosen what they believe to be the best content standards in English, science, math, and so forth. But there are a few that we feel should be in Catholic set. Performance standards, what students should be able to demonstrate, so to use imagination is an example. And then the effective or dispositional standards. So this was very interesting because as we read our church documents, we know formation is such a part of what we do in Catholic schools. And when you're looking at those areas, you will find that many guidelines that the church provides for us is on a dispositional level. So, so the preponderance of effective standards or dispositional standards within the Catholic curricular standards themselves.
This is really helpful. I think these slides are great to see the distinction between how it's written from other standards, right? So as you're saying, it's separated into those areas, and I like how it's general intellectual standards, and maybe Denise could speak more to this as she's been having conversations with teachers and aligning to these.
Mm-hmm. Well, we wanted to use language that is familiar to teachers. I mean, we wanted to enter in, we kind of wanted to bridge discussions between, you know, a Catholic or classical or curricular frameworks. I don't know how many of you remember that we didn't always have standards until around the 1990s. You know, we used curricular frameworks, and they were structured a little bit differently. The language was a little bit different. So we kind of wanted to use the same language and to build bridges. So we have these sets of standards, and the most important thing is that they're grounded in a Catholic perspective and Catholic worldview. So at the top of every one of the standards, we're bringing the teacher back to the teachings of the church on Catholic education, and so refocusing a little bit, reminding them that they're teaching in a Catholic school. It's very interesting because I was able to review over probably 130 sets of standards from the 176 dioceses that we have in the United States. And many of them did not reference back to our Catholic faith, our church documents, or come from a Catholic worldview perspective. And when you're looking at the document themselves, they would look very generic. Yeah. So we want to make sure that when teachers are planning, that they always have in back of their mind, or perhaps forefront and center, that we're different. You know, we have a different mission and a different purpose in Catholic schools, and to not forget that. So therefore, you know, we've put that up front and center.
We know that with the schools that we work, as the Diocese of Lansing, they do have conversations on how can we integrate or ensure that faith integration is threaded through every unit for every subject.
Right.
That's correct?
That's correct. Faith integration doesn't have to happen during every single lesson in the classroom, but certainly needs to be woven through every unit.
Right, which opens up the whole conversation, which we don't have time today, is the difference between what's a unit of instruction versus a lesson plan.
Right.
So, continue. Sorry, Denise.
Oh, no, this is perfect. Interject anytime. This is great. This is what people need to know. So what we've done, the general standards here tie back to those 5 key curricular components that I spoke about at the very beginning. So you'll see they're not only content standards, perhaps performance standards, but they're also effective standards. So these go back to the very beginning, the 5 key curricular components. And then each one of the disciplines is divided from K-6 to 7-12. I am sure that there will be a lot of overlap between the 6-7 grades if you're looking at pulling the standards into specific grades. We looked at the development. We looked at perhaps what thinking skills would be required for those particular standards, but feel free, if you feel that your school and your students can handle the 7th grade, 7th, 8th, some of those as well, to pull them down into the K-6.
Would you even say that it would be helpful if teams they do a read-through of the standards, and then the teachers have an opportunity to decipher what skills are appropriate for their own school, their curriculum? Does that make sense?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's exactly where this is going, because
Great.
You're talking about skills, and you're entering into the discussion of learning progressions. And those learning progressions can either be designed from the top down, from content experts down, you know, to kindergarten, or bubbled up from the teachers in the classroom who are actually teaching the different skills that might be necessary to achieve one of the standards. I'm an advocate of the bottom up, especially for these Catholic curricular standards. You're not going to find anything out there really that's going to help you. As a teacher, you're going to have to look at each of these standards, such as recognize Christian and Western symbols and symbolism, and explain how they communicate the battle between good and evil, and make reality visible. Well, first, kids need to know what a symbol is. You know, your first grader is not going to necessarily know, you know, what those symbols represent. So teachers in the classroom, you know what you teach, and you know where to best put this specific standard. So we have
you know, that you're making an excellent point, and again, I'm looking at Therese. I know you can't see us, but I'm looking at Therese in agreement that opens up the conversation with teachers between ELA, social studies, and theology or religion classes, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So that way they get a chance to say, how are we going to connect the learning of symbols within our curriculum, to unpack that. Is that what you're envisioning there?
Oh, most definitely, but I think you'll see that more in the high school level. Most of our K-6 teachers are generalists, so they'll be teaching all of, the subjects themselves. So conversations between classroom teachers, the third grade teachers in the school or in the district would happen. And then in high school for 7-12, you're going to see and hopefully encourage those conversations between theology, science, history, mathematics, and so forth. So most definitely.
Would you say that when a school aligns to these Catholic curriculum standards, should they still have an area for faith integration? Or would this coincide, is that the way I want to say that, Therese?
The way in which that we've been looking at it is the standard is very broad, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And then the faith integration is how do we implement the Catholic curriculum standard.
Okay, so we'll
speak to
that in just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, getting ahead of myself. All right, back to you, Denise.
No, this is great. I'm going to kind of speed up just a little bit because I know that we're looking at 45 minutes, and I could go on and on and on. But here again, let's see. Oh, we're moving all by itself here. There we go. All right, so interestingly enough, in mathematics, it's basically dispositional. You're not going to find a whole lot of content standards. Like I said before, as a school, you've already chosen those. But there are ways of looking at math that are indigenous to the human person as to our desires for orderliness, our desires for correctness and truth. So you're going to see a lot of dispositional standards, exhibit appreciation, to value the pursuit of understanding, exhibit habits of thinking, value beauty, harmony, proportion, radius, and wholeness present in mathematics. Who would have thought we'd have beauty and that universal, it's called a transcendental within mathematics, right? A sense of wonder about mathematical relationships. This brings us into a whole new world of mathematics, and aside from just, an algorithm or a perfunctory, multiplication set of tables and that kind of thing. It really helps us appreciate the beauty that surrounds us within the world in the operation of mathematics itself. So there's a lot there. But disposition, so I want to talk a little bit about an operational definition of a disposition. What is a disposition? Well, it's a relatively stable inclination to approach learning and problem solving in a particular way. We're all familiar with this from our university courses that we want to instill within students industriousness and open-mindedness and so forth. But also in a Catholic school, we want to instill dispositions of wonder, of appreciation, internalization of virtue and sacrifice, to be ardent pursuers of the truth, being an orderly thinker and a right thinker. So we have different dispositions that not only are in theology, religion classes, but overlay our other disciplines as well. So for a good, yeah,
would that be a good, I'm going to call it strand. I don't know if that's the correct terminology for the math area, for disposition. That would be a good conversation to have with the teachers to really clearly define what that looks for their curriculum, correct?
Exactly. And overall strands could be what is called the transcendentals, the truth, beauty, and goodness, because those strands you'll find in everything. I'm going to talk a little bit about that here.
Okay.
Maybe right now. Let's talk about that right now. So Appendix A and B, Dr. Guernsey, my colleague, the director of the K-12 program, wrote a beautiful piece on educating to truth, beauty, and goodness. So what that is these are basically what I've called transcendentals, or that's not my name for them, but in this conversation, transcendentals are universals. They're perennial truths that man has known for all time and will know. They're timeless. They're understood by mankind. Unconditional truth. Man is always asked why, and always has this inclination to really want to get to the bottom of things within him. You know, that draws us to the origin of the universe. Why am I here? And the first cause, God created us, truth incarnate, Jesus Christ, the preserver of truth, the Holy Spirit. So using truth as a strand will lead all of our subjects to the ultimate truth. Beauty itself. Beauty is harmony, radiance, and proportionality. Our minds are made that way. When you look at brain-based research, you'll see that we tend to close up ideas or close writing. If we're looking at perhaps a document that has the top portion of the letters eliminated from it, our minds will automatically close that up. That looks at wholeness, that looks at proportionality. We're made like that. That's our attribute of our being. Goodness is the perfection of things. We are designed for that. Love, obviously, we're made for love. There's tons of information about that. That's an attribute of who we are as a human person. And then there's another one, perfect being or home or harmony, which interestingly enough, I was just reading an article from one of my professional publications that talked about belonging. This is perfect being, perfect home, is belonging in a classroom, and how important that is for a teacher to establish that belonging of the student within the classroom environment or the school environment. So you can see there's these universal truths, these transcendentals, perennial principles, whatever you want to call them, that are attributes of mankind that we have lost in our Catholic education paradigm. For whatever reason, they're not there anymore, but they used to be very prominent in our Catholic liberal arts education. So we're bringing that discussion back home.
I think this question from Jeffrey connects to what you were just sharing. He asked, with regards to the richness of the concepts and developing intrigue amongst faculty members, how do you suggest supplementing certain classical ideas? He has as an ideas, and pardon how I pronounce this, in Aristotelian concepts of beauty, or a Euclidean view of mathematical unity?
Right, exactly. He pointed to a very important question, and something that we're addressing in a lot of our schools that are incorporating the Catholic curricular standards, is that our teachers have not been formed in this philosophy. Many of them have gone through universities without ever having a philosophy class. And it's so important because philosophy grounds everything. Philosophy grounds your approach to instruction, your approach to education, your approach to the human person, and you've got to get that philosophy right of who this human being is in front of me in order for everything else to flow. So faculty should probably take time to look at these types of questions, this type of approach, these universals, and to begin reading and forming themselves on education from this perspective, because you're not going to be able to teach it unless you fully and truly understand it yourself. I'm just learning. I've been doing this for over 25 years, and the understanding of philosophy is something that is so deep, and you can continue to learn and to understand. But it really is foundational for what we're attempting to do here within the Catholic curricular standards. Don't be put off that you think it's too hard. It's not too hard. It's just start somewhere.
It's a work in progress. You know, that goes to the saying that you're a lifelong learner. So you're always, you know, one more question as we continue to move on about this topic. Someone mentioned, you shared another diocese you were working with that was going through this process. They're wondering, what was that diocese again?
It's the Diocese of Venice in Florida.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to move fairly quickly here. This is, we do have a recommended reading list for schools. It's not the be-all, end-all. There are some other very wonderful reading lists out there. Some of the dioceses have created some really good reading lists. But it's important because we're looking at a different conversation than perhaps contemporary reading lists in our public schools. So we're looking at books and novels that look to the heart of the human man, his triumphs, his challenges, you know, whether he has succeeded in becoming a virtuous character or how he's failed. So, you know, we're looking at a little bit different set of literature as well, and that's in the back of the standard. We include best practices. These best practices are from our content experts out in the field. We not only used the knowledge base of the professors at Catholic colleges and universities, but we also sent this, the drafts out to the different dioceses who assisted us. Pensacola was a tremendous help. The Diocese of Marquette and Joliet were also very helpful in providing best practice information. And here's one for science. I'm going to let you all read that. Again, the resource material, there's almost one or two specific references for each one of the standards that a teacher can go back in and look a little bit deeper into this to form themselves in order then to be able to instruct students. So again, the dispositional standards, they're educational objectives with a different verbiage generally than what we're used to using in Catholic schools. We use behavioral objectives. We generally use a verb that we can see and we can assess. And in our Catholic curricular standards, being so many of them dispositional, it's really important that teachers understand there is a taxonomy for building values, beliefs, attitudes within our schools. You know, and this is Crockwell's taxonomy. It's one of many, but it's a standard where a student basically begins, once you get them to pay attention, receiving the information, then complying, then valuing or accepting. You'll see the words within the standards will correspond to these different levels. A lot of the initial standards will have basically students will accept or acknowledge or attend to in the K-6 area, all the way up to they are characterizing this particular virtue. Now, the Mary Mother of the Eucharist Order, the Dominican sisters, have a beautiful program called Education in Virtue. And they have what a virtue looks like, what a virtue sounds like. If you're interested in looking at their program for theology, it's basically for religion. It is based on these types of dispositions that we're hoping to form in our students. So we already teach these. We already teach, you know, love for our fellow man, love for God, for stewardship of creation, preferential option for the poor. All of the virtues are fair game for us in Catholic schools. We don't have to stick with the 2 or 3 soft skills like grit and perseverance and tenacity. We've done this forever. And really what we're doing in the standards is making some of these dispositions just explicit. Most of our schools are already doing this. Let me see where I'm at.
It's encouraging them to talk about it in more depth and have intentional connections with their curriculum.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Now, for that taxonomy, is that something that you would encourage schools to post maybe in secondary to provide to students, have it visible for them to see, or just for the educator?
Yeah, this is interesting because I have found that not a lot of Catholic school teachers really understand this affective domain. It's for us always been the hidden curriculum. It is not anything that has been explicit. We've always taught reverence and piety and all of these, wonderful skills, docility, humility. We want to see this in our students, and we teach it through example, and we teach it sometimes purposefully, but we've never explicitly put this in any set of standards or curriculum. We've never found the necessity of doing that. But they don't understand the affective taxonomy either. And when I teach at the university, specifically when I teach from a Catholic or classical perspective, I introduce the students to this affective domain because, we're instilling morals in our students. We want them to pay attention to what we're talking about. We want them to then display these types of skills for living and values. And then this just gives them a good, my students, a good visual, a good framework for which to stand. So they could use this as a point of discussion if they would like, teachers or administrators.
We just want to share our thanks for everyone that's still staying online. We know that we're approaching the hour here. I've just been enthralled with the information that you've been providing, Denise, and I just checked the time. So for those who are joining us online, if you can continue to join us, I'm thinking about 10 more minutes, ladies.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So, and then if you do need to run, no worries. Keep in mind that you will receive a recording of this webinar, as well as you can log on to our website, and I'm going to post that link into the chat box of where you can gather the blog and the resources. So I'll hand it back over to either Denise or Therese to continue.
Well, I would like to thank Dr. Denise Donohue for the enriched work that you've done and shared with us today. And I think you have shown a quick quote on the screen. If you would go back to that, Denise. Not everything that counts can be counted.
Sure.
And if you'd explain why that was included,
okay.
Then I will jump into the practical application of the Catholic curriculum standards.
Oh, thank you, Therese, because this is so important. This is so very important. Just by the fact that we're making a standard and we're using a disposition and we're making it explicit does not necessarily mean that that standard needs to be assessed within the classroom by student with rigor, that we're going to give it a grade. Generally, dispositions are looked at by class, by whole. Is my class becoming a kinder class? Are they showing more reverence? Are they more generous type of a class? So we look at it as a class and not necessarily require that we put in a grade for this, because what really dispositions cut at the heart of the person. They go right deep into who we are, and we don't want to be graded on whether we're docile or patient. We form students in docility and patience. So I personally am not an advocate for assessing soft skills. It can be done. It can be done in different ways. You could read in the back of the Catholic Curricular Standards how to do that. So not everything that counts can be counted, nor everything that can be counted counts. This is from Angela Duckworth. She's the guru on grit and tenacity, and she herself said, oh, wait a second here, we've perhaps gone down a path that we really didn't need to go down. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Therese, for bringing that back up. It's so important.
Thank you, Denise. I want to just say that as a diocesan curriculum director, assisting 33 schools in our diocese to enhance our mission, I was immediately intrigued by the Cardinal Newman Society development of the Catholic curriculum standards and pursued how we might incorporate these into our unit planners in Atlas, as that is our tool that we are using in the diocese. Even though Jeannie mentioned we've been with Rubicon International for 4 years, this has been a process as we've been moving forward, and we're actually retooling ourselves a little bit at this point just to get everybody on board, since we have, in our Catholic schools, we have typical turnover and need to bring all of our folks on board. So in the discussions with Dr. Donohue and knowing the flexibility of Atlas, we placed the Catholic curriculum standards as the umbrella to complement our own diocesan school standards. Certainly Rubicon Associates have worked with us to build our own template, and I realized that Denise was speaking about it being foundational, but we placed this right at the very top of our template so that it would be the very first thing that our teachers are looking at or thinking about, because we definitely want faith integration woven into all of our units. So as you can see on the next 3 slides, there are pieces of our diocesan template that our teachers are learning at this point to start to use. The Catholic curriculum standards have been purposely placed at the top, as I said, to bring it immediately to their attention as they create a unit. Visually, it's the umbrella, as I also spoke about the content standards and all other components requested in teacher development of the unit's student unit of study. One step we took with principals was to offer to them to jigsaw an article that was written by Dr. Donohue, and that will also be, I believe, posted in the blog. It's the disconnect between Common Core literary approach and Catholic education's pursuit of truth. So she spoke about that a little bit here. There's more in that article, and I would encourage folks taking a look at that as well, and actually jigsawing it with your teachers and having deep conversation about that. There are a number of resources available in each text box as you look through this, just to give some definition to teachers and to understand all of these components of understanding by design further. And
now, understanding by design is an approach to curriculum conversation and alignment?
Correct. Correct. And all of the components are there within our template. It's concepts and skills, assessments, resources, and so forth. We have overlaid it with the Catholic curriculum standards.
Excellent.
And then, Denise, if you would go to the next resource with our work with Rubicon Atlas, we have developed a quick guide that was there to assist principals in guiding teachers as to how to target Catholic curriculum standards, and that's really a tech tool, so to speak, how to bring them in. But you'll see, too, that in that line and in the very first red box, there is a link right in our template page that takes them right to the Catholic curriculum, Cardinal Newman Society curriculum standards, as well as all of their resources. So that is a great way to bring those things right to the forefront, so that teachers only have to click once instead of clicking out of Atlas and into other pages. And then I believe, Denise, you have a slide here with regards to sample application of the strands.
Okay, so I'm not going to go in just for the sake of time because it's pretty perfunctory. Most teachers are able to do this, but here's just a Catholic curricular standard. This is for science, moved to an educational objective. In this instance, it's broken out into 2 different objectives, and then your essential questions. So what does the church teach about the relationship between science and other academic subjects, the relationship between science and our faith, and so forth. So just moving from the standards themselves to an educational objective level, and then using the essential questions in your lesson plan.
I think as well, Denise, you made a very good point, and that is that we truly cannot give what we do not have, and as Catholic educators, to understand our faith even more deeply is extremely important as we pull all of these educational pieces together and help move our students forward in developing the whole child. I want to note that the Catholic curriculum standards from the Cardinal Newman Society are not copyrighted, and therefore it's a very easy access for all to use them, and I appreciate that very much as a Catholic educator, that resource is so rich and so available to all of us.
Yep, and it's our pleasure to be able to do that.
And I'd also like to take a moment to thank Rubicon International for the opportunity to share this information with you today. It seems to me as Catholic schools, this is what we need to keep in mind if we are to renew our commitment to Catholic education in the 3rd millennium. We must respond to challenging times with faith, vision, and the will to succeed, because the Catholic school's mission is vital to the future of our young people, our nation, and most especially our church.
Very good.
This is a quote from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. This is how we are to offer our schools as an option for parents, and as Denise spoke earlier, it's a way to provide a difference where it counts. Thank you very much, and I'd like to turn it back to Jeannie.
Thank you so much, Therese, and many thanks to you as well, Denise. We truly appreciate both of your time in joining us today and having this idea to share this information out to everyone that's joined us online. You know, we understand that it's 1 o'clock Eastern time, and also we've upon that hour. So what we'll do is we'll stay online. For those who have questions, continue to send them to us so that way we can answer them. And then once the questions stop, we'll go ahead and end the webinar. Just want to remind everyone that's online again that you'll receive a recording of this webinar shortly, as well as we'll be writing a blog, and that will be available later this month. And I've placed the link there into the chat box so that way you can not only receive the transcript of this webinar, but also all the valuable resources that have been shared by both Therese as well as Dr. Donohue. So many, many, many thanks. We truly appreciate asking us to partner with you to share this information. So with that said, we'd like to open up the chat box for additional questions, and we thank all that have joined us. Okay, Denise, a question did come in. It says, will the presenters be at the USCCB conference in Orlando?
I won't be there, but the president of the Cardinal Newman Society will be there. Neither Dr. Guernsey nor I will be able to attend.
Okay. Okay, so there'll be someone there to represent.
Right. Yeah, Patrick Riley will be available.
Great. Okay. And do people sign up for those? Is that how that works? Mm-hmm. Okay. Just making sure. Right. You know, some of the takeaways as people are getting offline here for me is just, you know, something that you shared, Denise, is the opportunity to get together with teachers with now the Catholic standards that you've put together to really pull it apart and say, this is something that we can integrate within our curriculum. We just need to decide where and how.
Right.
Probably doing it, right?
Yeah, when they call and they ask me, the initial guidance that I will give to superintendents or heads of school is to basically just take one or two that you feel very comfortable with, that you as a school or as a classroom or as a teacher can wrap your arms around and say, I know this, I can do this, I can integrate this into X, Y, and Z lessons that I've already taught. Boom, you're there, you've got it. And some of them are very challenging that you really need to have more information about. And so it's not necessarily that you take them all in one fell swoop, unless you have guidance like like Therese or a curriculum director within your diocese. Many of the dioceses do not have support. So a lot of the principals and teachers are doing this on their own, and they, I just say take one or two and do them well, because you'll find that they integrate within the other subject content areas.
Denise, you made that recommendation to us, and on a small scale, we have started to do it that way, and it has proved to be very enlightening for our teachers, because it does give them the opportunity to intentionally teach these very important pieces, and it gives them guidance. They have wondered about, how do I involve faith integration through this process? So this has given them the guidance and the intentionality to move that forward as they practice in the classroom.
Good. That's good to hear.
Everyone, it's always that keep it simple, start small.
Right.
Yeah. Great. Well, there's no other questions coming in. Anna, did any come in through your chat box?
No, none are coming in through the Q&A.
Okay. Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap our time up today. Again, we cannot thank both of you, Dr. Donohue as well as Therese, for your time in making this come to fruition. This has been amazing. So thank you. Enjoy your weekend and safe travels, Dr. Donohue, wherever you're off to now.
Italy. Yeah.
Fantastic. Enjoy.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a great trip. Thank you so much, Denise.
Same to you, Therese. Appreciate it.